Anytime a new worship team member joins my worship team, there are 5 things that I tell them, and I do so unapologetically because I know that they're true. They might seem harsh at first, but they're true, and new worship team members need to hear them. Here's what they are. The first is this, is that the biggest sign that someone will actually make it onto the worship team is simply that they come to worship rehearsal. In my worship ministry, I require that all worship team members be at worship rehearsal. We have rehearsals on Thursday nights. They be at the Thursday night rehearsal if they're going to play on Sunday. And as a general rule, if you're not able to be at rehearsal on Thursday, then you won't play on Sunday. Sometimes I make exceptions for that if somebody has been consistently coming to rehearsal for a long time and then they just can't make it one Thursday, but they already know all the songs that we're doing. But as a general rule, I want my worship team members to be at rehearsal. And I've noticed over my 18 years of worship leading and leading worship teams, I've noticed that all it takes, not all it takes, but a lot of what it takes to be on the worship team is simply coming to worship rehearsals. It's really that simple. So I tell new worship team members, listen, if you want to be on the worship team, this is what it boils down to. You come to worship rehearsals because there's so much that happens at worship rehearsal that you can't just get if you're coming on and off and you're just learning your songs at home. And this is part of the reason that I want my worship team members, not just want, but I require them to come to worship rehearsal, is because worship rehearsal isn't just about learning how to play your songs. Worship rehearsal is, from a musical side, yes, we want to know how to play our songs, but technically we're supposed to be doing that before we even show up to worship rehearsal. So from a musical perspective, worship rehearsal is meant for the team who has already learned all their parts individually to figure out how to put those together as a band. That's the power of worship rehearsal, is that you learned your part at home, and now we're going to figure out how to play that part that you've already learned at home. I'll say it one more time. That you've already learned at home, you're going to learn how to put that together with the rest of the team. So from a musical perspective, there's that side of it. Then there's also the relational side of worship rehearsals, where it's not just how do I play my instrument along with other musicians, but how do I build relationships with the musicians I'm actually playing with. I think that that is sort of an intangible thing that not a lot of musicians think about, but I've noticed that the stronger my worship team's relationships are, the better we play together musically. Because there's certain subtle things that team members do when they're interacting with each other while we're playing a song that you develop outside of just rehearsing a song. So we've talked about the musical benefits, we've talked about the relational benefits, but those two things ultimately don't matter if we don't have the third benefit, which is the spiritual benefit of coming to worship rehearsal. At my worship rehearsals, we always have a devotional time where we study the Bible, something usually that pertains to worship leading, and through that, my team grows spiritually. I grow spiritually as well. As we study the Bible, we are shaped more and more into the image of Christ, and we're able to do our job better on Sunday. And so for those 3 reasons, I tell new worship team members, listen, the biggest commitment I want you to make, there's commitments you have to make whenever you're joining the worship team. You got to learn your songs, stuff like that. But the single biggest commitment I need you to make is to simply show up to worship rehearsals. If you don't come consistently, guess what? 99% of the time, it's not going to work out. And not just because I require worship team members to come to worship rehearsal, but because of all of those benefits I just talked about. Here's the second thing I unashamedly tell new worship team members, and it's sort of become a joke on my team, but I always tell people, come in on verse 2. I say, you are not going to play on verse 1. And obviously, that's not like a hard and fast rule. That's just a general rule. But the reason that I tell them that is because I want them to start thinking through the arrangements of songs, especially if someone's never played in any band setting before and they just practice at home or they're just singing along with the radio if they're a vocalist. What do you do whenever you do that? You're not going to sit there while you're running through a song and be like, I don't come in until verse 2 with this song. No, you're going to play because you want to have fun, right? Or you might just start at verse 2 if that's when you come in. But what new worship team members need to learn is that you aren't going to play all the time. And so when I say come in on verse 2, that's really what I'm communicating. And the way I communicate it is, first of all, I tell this to every worship team member, and I tell them in front of the other worship team members because all of the other worship team members will laugh because they know that I talk about this all the time. I say, it's nothing against you personally, but I don't want you to come in until verse 2. And the reason that we do that is because we want to arrange the song so that it has a dynamic over time that builds and then cuts off, depending on what the actual dynamic structure of the song is. But we want to think through those things. We want parts that are loud, parts that are quiet, parts with guitar just playing, parts with piano just playing, parts with piano, guitar, drums, bass all playing together. And so one of the tangible ways we do that is to have different instruments or different vocalists, if you're singing harmony, come in at different points in the song. And so I tell all of that to you so that you understand that if you're up here on Sunday and you're leading worship and you aren't singing into the microphone or you aren't playing your instrument, that's okay. That's actually what you're supposed to be doing. You're not doing anything wrong if you aren't playing at all times. In fact, you're doing something wrong if you are playing at all times. The third thing I unashamedly tell new worship team members is, hey, I'm going to critique you. I'm going to provide, hopefully, constructive criticism. When I say critique, it's not criticism. It's not, hey, that sounds really bad. It's, hey, instead of doing this drum fill, why don't you try this drum fill? And I feel the need to tell people that up front because it needs to happen, and we need to set that expectation that Spencer and maybe even other members of the worship team, if they hear something, they're going to be providing different options for me to play. And it's not that, well, I mean, it kind of is that you played something wrong or you did something wrong, but we do it for your benefit. I do it because I want you to sound as good as you possibly can. And if you don't tell people that up front, then there's a chance that they'll get offended. They still might get offended, but at least this lets them know what you're trying to do and you can explain it ahead of time, as opposed to never saying anything to new worship team members when they first join the team. And then that first time they sing a harmony that sounds bad, you say, what if we didn't do that part and we waited to come in until verse 2? And then they think to themselves, Spencer's mad at me. He just told me I sounded horrible in front of everybody. As opposed to me going through my code of conduct and my worship ministry overview when somebody first joins the team, and one of the things in there is you're going to receive criticism because we want to play as best as we possibly can. And so don't be surprised when we're going through a song and I might stop it and say, hey, instead of doing this part here, let's try this, or I don't want you to come in yet, I want you to come in on verse 2. That way they know ahead of time, I'm not being mean, I'm critiquing you. And by the way, people are able to critique me too if I do something weird. I'm not immune to constructive criticism, but we have a culture of critique on our team because that's how we improve. And by the way, if you don't have a code of conduct worship ministry overview like I talked about, you can find one linked for free down in the description below. It's called my worship team toolkit. In that, I give you my worship ministry overview, which you can pretty much just copy and paste right into your worship ministry. And I also give you an application form for new members who want to join the worship team to fill out. So check that out down in the description below. The fourth thing I tell new worship team members unashamedly is that you must be a believer to be on the worship team. I believe that the Bible teaches that unbelievers cannot worship God for a number of reasons, but let's just think through the main verse, John 4:24, I believe it is. We must worship in spirit and in truth. Unbelievers don't know the truth, and they don't have the Spirit. Therefore, they cannot worship, and if somebody can't worship, my theology of what people who are up front leading the musical singing is that they are all worship leaders. In order to be a worship leader, you must know how to worship, and only believers can worship. Unbelievers are just playing music, and I'm not just looking for people to play music, I'm looking for people to lead worship. And so I tell new worship team members, in fact, it's in that application form that I've linked down in the description below, one of the main questions is, tell me how you came to know Christ. Something along those lines. Share a brief testimony of how you came to faith, or something. I forget how I worded it in the application form. But if somebody filled that out and they said, I don't know Christ, then I would, first of all, share the gospel with them. But second of all, I wouldn't allow them on the worship team until they made a profession of faith. So I am unashamed to tell potential new worship team members that because I think it is such a necessary part of being on the worship team that I'm not willing to compromise on it. And then the fifth thing I unashamedly tell new worship team members is I share my code of conduct with them. I think as worship team leaders, it's easy to just shy away from this and think, I don't want to come off as legalistic. And so I just won't have anything spelled out. And we'll just deal with the problem whenever it comes up. And then what happens? A problem comes up, and then you talk to the person about that, and they're like, well, I didn't know about that because nobody ever told me. And you think to yourself, well, you should have known because it's kind of obvious. But the thing is, it wasn't obvious to them, and so why not just spell it out up front? That way we are super clear with our expectations for what it means to be a worship team member. And so what are some of the things that we talk about in my worship team code of conduct? We talk about logistical expectations. We talk about being at rehearsal on Thursdays if you want to play on Sunday. We talk about learning your songs before rehearsal. That's something that might seem obvious to us, but it's not obvious to everyone. We talk about showing up on time to worship rehearsals and Sunday mornings. We talk about church attendance. I don't just want you to come whenever you're serving on Sunday, but I want you to be there even when you're not serving, because we don't just come to church to play music on Sunday, but we come to church because we're a part of the church. We talk about dress code. What should you be wearing? What should you not be wearing? We talk about moral expectations, such as drug use, alcohol use, cursing. We talk about sexual relationships. Oh, that's scary, right, to talk about? No, just spell it out ahead of time. Have it written down on a piece of paper. Say something like, if you're engaged in a sexual relationship with someone who you're not married to right now, that could cover a wide range of things, affairs, premarital sex, things like that. Say, then we ask that you don't serve on the worship team right now. You can talk about homosexual relationships in this part, and you know what your church believes about it, so don't hide it. You probably have a statement of faith on your website that says, we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. A lot of churches have that on their website now. So just put it in your code of conduct so that people know what expectations people are held to. So if you don't have a code of conduct like that, please check out the Worship Team Toolkit. I'll link it down in the description below. In that, I will give you my code of conduct, which you can pretty much just copy and paste right into your own worship ministry. Also give you my application form that I give to new worship team members whenever they want to join the team. So check that out down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.